Alrighty, welcome everybody. Thank you for your time, dedication, and your efforts to get here on time on a Monday morning, on a wintry Cape Town Monday morning. I am wearing my winter beard, which is a good sign that it is release season in the Cape at the moment. So we do appreciate you spending the time. We know it's a very busy time of year for releases and events and tastings and things, so thanks again for coming. Hogan, so Jocelyn, your name is not Jocelyn Hogan, it was once upon a time, but it is Wilson. So Hogan is your maiden name? Is that, I mean, why did you call your wine after your maiden name rather than your married name? Because you were already married by the time you...
I was already married.
With kids and...
Yeah, with kids. It was my father who partnered up with me. He was the one who could see that I was missing wine terribly. So I was in a sabbatical period between, I'd just left Labrie and little babies running around, and I'd got involved with protea farming. So we do proteas and fruit on our farm in Bannock. So during that sabbatical period, I spent some time. We established about 5 hectares of protea, so I can't quite call it a full break sabbatical. I got put to work. But it was a good period just to sort of pause and think about what I wanted to do as a mum. And so it was my father who got hold of me and said, I can see you're missing wine terribly. Let's perhaps give it a go. And that's where Hogan came about, when we started off with 5 barrels in 2014. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hence the name Hogan. There was a bit of friction initially about Hogan versus Wilson.
Was there within the house? Or was
Hubby's like, oh, why? What's wrong with Wilson? And he's like, well, Hogan's a bit more rare, and Wilson's, like toffees. And no, not quite that bad, but anyway.
So all the truth came out? And,
There we go. Gosh.
And you may notice that this is the second release of Jocelyn's Wines we've done this year. We released the 21s earlier in the year. But the reason why we're releasing the 22s is we've gone through the 21s, which was a nice situation to have, that the wines are selling out. But we thought, rather than wait for 6 months with no wine, we'd release the 22s. We tasted the 22s; they're ready to release. It's not like they're super tight like 21, which was much more structured. How did 22 go for you in terms of? I mean, that's the sort of the theme of 22 for now? Yeah. Is that how you would assess the vintage in terms of being more open, or?
Open, restraint. Delicacy and restraint is probably those two words that come to mind when I think of 2022. I had to seriously be on my toes in terms of picking, and because I could see from bud burst, we were 7 to 14 days late at bud burst. So that immediately, warning bells is, what am I going to do about the Swartland when you are 14 days late? Because those grapes now have to wait another 2 weeks to be able to be picked. So there are a couple of things you can do, but early picking portions was something that came to mind. I realized immediately I would have to secure more fruit from a younger block where I get an early picking portion. So that, because I had a feeling that acidity is going to be an issue in the Swartland this year.
Right.
So, which it was a tough year in terms of acid. But if you were organized and know your vineyards, there are things that you can work around. Also, I left slightly more canopy in the Swartland for some shading of those bunches. A lot of people went big with their shoot removal and opened up canopy. So mildew is the flip side of leaving a bit of canopy, but it paid dividends when it came to picking the latest ever I've picked my Chenin. So those sort of things, and working with your farmers intensively.
So it was sorry to interrupt. Was it a low disease pressure year, or?
I see it as high.
Okay.
It was high for me,
right.
Particularly in Carignan. Carignan is, in terms of mildew, is my litmus test.
Right.
But we were on it. I mean, my farmer was spraying every week from November right through to a withhold date. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So we really had to be careful.
Okay. So it's disease pressure and
lovely cool spring
and low acids. That's not the best combination, is it?
It wasn't easy. But I'm delighted. I think the wines are really
we can taste the wines now,
but a lot of thought has gone into what happened.
Yeah. I mean, the recent low acid years would be sort of 18 and 16, and this is a very different vintage because it hasn't got the sort of the heat of the ripeness of those two vintages, perhaps.
For sure. It's a little bit like 19.
Okay.
I found the flavors were there at a lower brix, which was beneficial. With cool spring, what you sometimes find with your grapes is that the skins are slightly thinner, and that bodes for flavor development at a lower brix. So, and I found that in 19 as well, just going back on my harvest notes, what I could see there.
Yeah.
Also, with the excess rain, we had a lot of rain over spring and amazing cold units. With my husband being a fruit farmer, we're often looking at, have we had sufficient cold units? We were able to irrigate post-harvest. There was plenty of water available, so that was beneficial. That helped tremendously. And so berries, higher uptake of water with more availability of water. So also softness of flavor. Not these. I can see a huge difference in the Swartland between the size of the berries because of water availability. Yeah. Which will affect flavors and style of wine produced. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I see one wine missing from the complete Hogan range, which is the lift.
Yeah.
Why is there no lift?
So
Well, maybe for those who don't know what the lift is,
Yeah.
chat about the lift first,
okay.
and then you can explain why it's not here.
Cool.
And we want answers.
I know. I'm trying, guys. It just won't bloody behave, the floor. Yeah. So it's the idea is I love the wines from Merith, Finos, Manzaniers, but there is a young group of winemakers who are making floor wine. So not through like the Fino process, where it's literally still wine, and a portion of it has had a bit of floor growth. So I started experimenting with this concept. This was 2020, Dave, I think it was, if I'm right. We released the 21,
yes,
if I've got the dates right. But 3 different vintages of my my Chenin. I love oxidized style white. So the early picking portion, there was sometimes a little bit over. And with it being early pick portion, it's got lower pH. So if you think of the wines of Areth, they work with Palomino, and it's always at a low pH. So you want neutrality to be able to work nicely with floor. You don't want overt fruity flavors when you are making a floor style wine or anything in contact with floor. So the year that it did work and we were able to make the lift, I managed to get a portion of mother culture from Bernard Bradell from Science of Sinai. He uses, there's a bit of floor in his Senor Talas, or did I say it correctly? So, because I couldn't get it to naturally grow in the Zorgvliet cellar. Maybe it's telling me something. It doesn't just want to grow. So I had a fantastic floor layer develop on one of the barrels from Bernie, thanks to him, and blended that with just barrels that had been, I think it was like 3 vintages, if I'm correct, 18, 19, and 20.
Yes, it was 3 vintages, yeah.
Of which one of them was underfloor. So some people asked, why didn't you just, bottle the straight floor one? It just, the character was too dominant. But ever since then, I've tried every single year. Bernie sadly got rid of his mother culture. It grows beautifully, his floor in his cellar. I think it's also exposure to the ocean, where he's based in the Helderberg. In Jerez, the ocean proximity and those cool breezes coming through the ocean somehow tend to fluff up the floor. So I haven't been able to get access to mother culture. To the point this year, I got hold of Lorraine Geldenes at Elsenburg, and she's very, very kindly gave me a bit of mother culture, which we started from scratch and built up, and I fermented 1 barrel. It's the yeast strain is Saccharomyces beticus, so that is definition of floor yeast, isolated floor yeast. So she isolated it for me, and still the layer's not growing properly. So
do you need to maybe ferment it in a different cellar, perhaps, away from?
That would be probably the best option, Dave.
Go get cozy with Bernie.
There we go.
And
Bernie will have me. I'll let my barrel get cozy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a shame, but hopefully we'll see it again this year. We'll chat about the individual wines as we taste them. But what's been happening in Hogan Wines in terms of plans forward, fruit sources, obviously because you don't own any vineyards at the moment. Obviously I think there's a bit of more of a focus on Bannock as an area for you, maybe looking forward into a few vintages. Maybe update us on that perhaps.
Yeah. So after spending some time with Bernard Bradell and sharing blocks with various other winemakers, and the exchange of knowledge and those relationships are just invaluable, and they're just such beautiful people in our industry who are just so willing to share and work together. So that has been a huge part of the journey, Dave, and the regenerative practices of the cover cropping, 0 herbicides, mulching. It's costly, but every year I try and allocate a bit of my budget to one particular vineyard. It's like the Carignan, we mulched this year, so I could strip the bunkie, get rid of all the weeds, mulch, and then I know for 3 years we don't have to think about herbicides, scoffling. It's just a lovely balance.
Why is that beneficial? Why is that advantageous?
Herbicides. Why don't you want herbicides? Just what it does just to nature in general.
Okay.
Your flora and fauna, your natural biological pests. It wipes all of those out. And I want to give back to these soils by every year spraying with hectic herbicides. You're just stripping what naturally should be there.
And then obviously better, healthier soils would hopefully produce better, healthier grapes. Is that
100%.
the sort of
So increase organic matter content.
Yep.
It's huge in soil science. We studied advanced. Everything about soil is organic matter content, giving
Okay.
back. So in a year like this, stabilization of soils with cover cropping, you can often see just like the roads between the vineyards versus if they've cover cropped properly, especially in wet years like this, how stable those soils are. You're not losing top layer soil,
Okay.
which is important.
Cool. Nice one. And then, and how are the farmers, the landowners that you're working with, how is their response to that? Is it mixed, or are they all pretty much on board as long as you're paying for it, essentially? Or?
Yeah, it's a slow grow, particularly in farms where they're like fourth, fifth generational, and the owner has always farmed in a certain manner. Like, for example, they will cover crop one row and miss one row, and then the next year they switch it around, and they'll just use one cover crop all the time. So it's like a monoculture of cover crop.
Okay.
To try and change up the conversation. So that's when I'll ask like a Bernie or a Christella Riche, because my Afrikaans is atrocious. So I'm like, asseblief oom kan ons, you know. I say, Bernie, please come help, you know. So,
Bernie.
gosh. So, but when they do see how those vineyards are bouncing back, and just to see tonnage improving. What I've seen in the Cinzo vineyard, a 45-year-old bush vine Cinzo vineyard in the Helderberg that we've been working with for, I'd say, about 5 years now, that we've been implementing these practices, and just what I'm seeing in the cellar, I'm just absolutely blown away how the quality is improving, how the wine is maintaining acid better than it ever has.
Yeah, right.
On my Shinnon vineyard, so that I've been working with the older block, which is a 42-year-old block. I've been working with that since day one. We were sitting at about 1.5 tons per hectare. I did the analysis with the farmer now, and we're close on 4 tons a hectare.
Yeah,
it's
wow.
beefed up to. So those grapes are all going to the cooperative prior to me getting involved.
Yes.
And more money being available for the farmer to implement properly. What we're seeing is just fantastic. It really is. Yeah.
And more great wine for us to drink. So
Happy.
it's a win-win.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. The Cabernet Franc and Chardonnay are recent additions, or the most recent additions to the range. Have you got anything else in mind in the future, or is 4 enough for now? Four plus,
Yeah.
this lift perhaps if it works.
The lift, if it works, experimental. It'll always be a fun experimental on the side. We played around with a bit of Chenin Blanc from the Bannock. So it's a vineyard just below where I source my Chardonnay from, on the Simonsberg, next to Tolima. And these must be about, I don't have an exact age, but I'd guess between 15 and 20-year-old. I need to get an exact age from the farmer. But I'm blown away by the quality of the Chard that I'm getting from this block. So if it's literally just below it, I'm so excited. Well, it's looking very promising.
Awesome.
And also to have a wine that's WO Bannock, because it's home. It's really is my place, and where my hubby and I, our roots are there. It really is lovely to have fruit from there. The 2021 was a straight Bannock Chard. I've been playing with an Clarke vineyard that comes into play as well with that, that I blend with that Chardonnay. But going forward, after having made a straight Bannock Chardonnay, the future is to stick with just Bannock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And talking about Bannock and farming, are you planting vines, do you think, eventually on...
Guys, it would be lovely.
I can't even say the farm's name. What is the farm's name?
Dwaas Riviershoek.
Yeah, so I'll let you know.
On the Zeven Rivier in Pat, can you imagine when you tell the
No,
courier?
I've seen the label. It's like, it has to be a wraparound label.
No, full on it. It's like a Bokonheidskloof. It's going to go right around if we ever use it.
Yeah. But is there a plan there to put vines, or is it not sort of suitable?
It is suitable.
Okay, right.
Chard, Cab Franc, it would be a dream to look at on our richer soils, maybe a Stockbay Palki setup. It's toying with that, or possibly a tiny maturation cellar. I mean, I've got a wonderful relationship with Zorgfleet where I rent space and do everything there at the moment, and I share a portion of the cellar with Jenny from Botanica, and lovely people at Zorgfleet. It just works really well there.
Yeah,
so
right.
I could see it as maybe primary processing in the future there, and possibly just maturation later at my place. But
like in bond sort of storage as well.
in barrel.
Yeah, but
maybe a tiny bit in bond.
Right.
So we fruit farmers. It's fruit packaging. It's difficult to try and get finished stored wine.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, well, I reckon we get into tasting some of the wine.